Dime, dime why? Dime why you do this to me? Please, Dime, help me. Welcome back to 31 Days of Halloween. I can say now, finally, after all of my years of existence, that I have watched The Exorcist, one of the movies that for several decades has terrified me out of my mind, based on the fact that I don't typically do well with possession and exorcism movies, because the idea of being possessed by something evil absolutely terrifies the pants off of me. And also just based on the kind of, like, what is the word that I'm looking for? Like, awe or mythos that this movie has around it. The fact that it's supposed to be a cursed film, the fact that people fainted while watching it, they threw up, they walked out of the movie theater. My mom tells a story about how she saw this in theaters, and then her and her friend heard a scary noise when they were walking home at night, and then basically sprinted all the way home because it scared them so much, and she'll never watch it again. It has so much love for it. And I am sorry to say that I do not share that love for this movie. This is a very long, very, very long 2-hour and 12-minute movie. And I emphasize the very long because I just a couple of days ago watched I Saw the Devil, and that was a 2-hour and 22-minute movie, and that did not feel like 2 hours and 22 minutes at all. That felt like a very fast, like, hour and a half movie, like a typical horror movie. So when I saw that The Exorcist was going to be 2 hours and 12 minutes, I was like, all right, like, this movie's supposed to be super scary. This movie's supposed to be really good. This is a cornerstone of horror. And I figured, even if it is, even if the effects aren't as good or realistic as they were for that time period, like, practical effects tend to still hold a lot of water and a lot of weight. I mean, the practical effects in The Thing are still fantastically good to this day, or Alien, a bunch of other movies. If it's practical effects, it still tends to hold up. And I think most of what you see in The Exorcist is really practical effects, and they just don't look good. They don't look scary. I guess I can't say they don't not look good. They do still look good. They're just not scary. They didn't scare me the same way that, like, some of the Exorcist movies or exorcism movies that I've seen in recent years were scary. And I think this movie's kind of would have been like Poltergeist for me, where I wish I could have gone back in time and seen it, like, before hearing all the hype and, like, seeing it in that zeitgeist, because for that time period I can understand why a movie about, like, an exorcism and a possession like this with the devil or a demon would be so scary, because it was something new that was being introduced to people. I mean, we've had exorcisms and possessions and stuff for centuries, like, since people started having religions. Like, we've always believed that people can be possessed by evil spirits and stuff. Even Native Americans have their own kind of mythos surrounding it. So it's not just like a Catholic thing or a Christian thing. It's in every religion thing. So it's always been here, but it wasn't always at the forefront of everyone's, like, cultural knowledge or, like, kind of embedded in real life. Now it's I guess because of the Exorcist movie, now when we see, like, news about, oh, someone had an exorcism and it went badly, we're like, oh, okay, like, we know what an exorcism is. We know what may cause them and how, like, we treat them differently now because we understand mental health better. But at the time, it's actually kind of interesting to see that process in this movie. That was one of the things that I liked, even though it took forever to get through. Like, you see Regan, and I'm going to go with Regan, even though, because that's what her mother calls her. Her mother calls her Regan. A couple other characters call her Regan, which is, like, how her name looks like it should be pronounced based on the way it's spelled, but I'm going to call her Regan because that's what her mother calls her, and I'm pretty sure that's what everybody on, like, those shows that talk about this movie calls her. So it was interesting to watch Regan go through this process where she's doing all of the medical tests, and then they're looking at her for psychiatric issues, and like even the priests are like, look, we have to rule all this other stuff out before we can do an exorcism, which is how it's actually done in real life. Like, you have to rule that stuff out, because a lot of times before we knew about this kind of stuff, people who had like schizophrenia or bipolar, or a couple other mental health issues, it was assumed that they were possessed because they were acting, for lack of a better word, crazy. Or like they were possessed. They had the different personalities, or they acted completely out of character for themselves. So it was pretty cool to see Regan go through these stages, even though it was kind of weird how they jumped. Her mother brings her into the doctors, and all we've seen up to this point is Regan make one weird comment to a party guest, of which nothing comes from it. And then she pees in the middle of the room, and then her mother witnesses the bed shaking with Regan on it. And then all of a sudden, we're at a stage where she's getting, like, needles put into her throat, and they're doing all these x-rays and all of these things, and it's like, I don't know, it just seemed like such an extreme jump, and the mother's already freaking out. I don't know, that part of the movie went so fast, and then there were other parts that just dragged. Like the whole beginning where Father Merrin finds the little demon statue, and like we spend so much time in this other country, and I don't understand why. It really doesn't lend anything extra to the film, in my opinion. And then you have this whole other separate thing with the cop who's trying to investigate the death and or murder of the director Burke. And it's like, he's such an unnecessary part to this movie. I don't know if he played a bigger role in the book, but every time he showed up on screen, it just took forever for him to get back off or to move through wherever we were going in this movie. And then finally, by the last 40 minutes or so, I guess, is when things start to really pick up with Regan, and we see her starting to do a lot of these behaviors that are essentially famous and get parodied a lot, or we've seen it on shows talking about like the greatest horror movies of all time, where her head spins around, or she spits up that pea soup, or she's levitating off the bed. So we finally get to see all of that. It just took so long for this movie to process, and by the end of it, I felt largely underwhelmed. And I don't know if it's, like I said, because I came into this movie with so much hype around it, and I guess such high expectations. I've been afraid of this movie for as long as I can remember. You know, and it's supposed to be one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and maybe I just went into it expecting too much. Who knows? But I rated this movie a 2. And my friend was very generous in my opinion and gave it a 4. Why'd you give the movie a 4? So he gave the movie a 4, basically because, in his words, it's a horror movie, and they are pity points because it's a movie from so long ago. I gave it a 2 because I just didn't enjoy watching it. It has no rewatchability for me, and if I'm going to give something over a 2, or getting up to a 4, I have to want to rewatch it in some capacity, whether it's for a character, to see a part of the story again, for a scene that I particularly liked, and I would never rewatch this movie. It's kind of like Deliverance for me, which I think I also gave a very low score to. And just like with Deliverance, the critics and general viewership scores for this are really high. They're all in the 80s. Again, probably because some of this is coming from people who saw it when it first came out. Maybe people who are still more affected by exorcisms and stuff like that and I can't even say than I am, because the idea of an exorcism and possession still terrifies the pants off of me. This movie just doesn't. Or maybe people who just read the book and like the adaptation, the stylism in this, the themes in it, because I know there's a lot of themes that run through this. You know, everybody sees something different in movies that they really enjoy. So maybe if you're looking at it for those things, then you're probably going to like it. If you're looking at it from like my point of view, where you're looking for something to, I guess, really scare you, or I don't even know what this movie could have done to have made it better for me. One of the things that I really hated about it was Regan's voice. So when she really starts getting into um, the possession part of it, her voice changes. So it's no longer Regan. It's, I guess, this demon that's in her. Um, and it's an obviously male voice. Like, you can tell that it's a man doing it. And every so often you can see that the words that are coming out don't match up with Regan's mouth, which is one of the reasons why I never listen to anything dubbed, because that drives me crazy. So it's driving me even more crazy now, and I think the movie might have been better for me if it was still Regan talking, or her actress talking, because then, like, not only is this little girl saying these horrible, awful things, she's saying it in a little girl voice, which to me is even scarier, because now it's almost like, well, is it actually the demon speaking, or is this just Regan? I think that would have made it better. One of the things that I did like was all of the very subtle hints that the demon was getting closer. So once Regan really starts to act like she's starting to feel this possession, you will see the demon's face kind of pop up in places. There'll be flashes of it on the screen. A light will turn off, and very, very slowly the demon will kind of fade into the picture, but like not really clearly, so that you see it like right away. It's like a background sort of thing. It's like, oh, what's that in that shadow? It looks kind of weird. So I thought that was neat, and that was probably the only neat thing that I thought about that I thought was there in the movie. You know, the special effects, the makeup effects were really good. The stuff Regan was spitting on people, I mean, it was fine, I guess. It was gross. It wasn't the same kind of like gross feeling that I get from some of the newer movies that I see. And again, I understand this is an older movie. It's not going to have the best special effects. But it's not one of those things that carries through, like I said, with The Thing or Alien. Those practical effects will probably follow through even decades later than me talking about them now. Whereas the practical effects in this, I don't think are going to carry through. And that is unfortunately just the way that I feel about this movie. So I know I'm probably going to get a lot of people disagreeing with me on this and thinking that I'm an idiot for thinking that a movie as great and wonderful and classic and scary as The Exorcist is only worth a 2 out of a scale of 10. Like, I didn't even give it any pity points. You know, or like what I usually do, where I give extra points for, you know, understanding that it's a horror cornerstone or a cultural cornerstone. And I think part of that is because it's just had so much hype and so much meaning to me prior to me seeing it, that it was just such a letdown. I didn't get any chills watching this movie. You know, it's supposed to be a cursed film, because weird stuff happened on set and people died and this and that. Again, sometimes I believe in the whole cursed film thing. Sometimes I don't. Depends on how much you want to read into it. But that is my take on The Exorcist. And sadly, I did not like it as much as I thought I would, and I was not scared like I thought I would be, or at all. So, you know, that is what it is. You can't win all of them. So far, I don't think I've liked any of the classic movies that I've had on here, from the earlier decades. Have I? No. No, I haven't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a classic sort of person. But you can't make everybody happy. Not every movie is for everybody. So thank you guys for coming to watch this video with me. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. There will be no spoilers today. We all kind of know how The Exorcist ends. Unless you're like really, really young and you've never had any exposure to anything else regarding this movie. But I really don't feel like I need to get into any of the spoilers. So if you would like to watch it for the sake of saying that you've seen it, or just to kind of round out your horror movie education and make sure that you do view all the classics, I would see it for that reason. I wouldn't necessarily go into it expecting to love it or being terribly scared of it. I don't want to overhype it. I don't want to undersell it either, because I know a lot of people really do like it. But I would say just go into it not really expecting to love or hate it. And then just see how it works for you. So that is it for today. Please come back and watch again for the next video. And I will see you guys.
It's still a horror movie.
It's still a horror movie.
A long time ago.
So you're basically giving it like pity points, basically.
Yeah.
It was a pretty shitty movie.
It was a pretty shitty movie.
Okay.
If anybody's gonna watch this, which they probably will watch this, I don't